The Bentley pulled up 2 minutes before 6, its engine purring low like a restrained animal. Matthew Lane, CEO of Axis Tech and the kind of man who kept entire markets on edge with a single shift of his expression, checked his watch despite knowing it was accurate to the second. He had made it just in time for parent-teacher night. His assistant had reminded him twice and his calendar had pinged hourly. But the truth was he wouldn't have forgotten, not this year. He stepped out into the chill of a November evening, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored wool coat as he scanned the school building like it was a new acquisition. Low ceilings, faded red bricks, kids' artwork taped to the windows. It smelled like glue and cafeteria spaghetti the moment he walked in. It was alien terrain. The gym had been cleared of dodgeballs and rearranged with folding chairs and makeshift booths labeled by grade level. Parents clustered around teachers, some in puffer vests and jeans, others in business casual, one woman holding a baby on her hip while whispering to a man who looked half asleep. Matthew stood out, not just because of his tailored coat or polished shoes, but because he was alone. He always was. "Mr. Lane," a voice pulled him from the crowd. He turned. The woman was younger than he'd expected, probably early 30s. No glasses, no cardigan, just a dark green knit sweater tucked into high-waisted jeans, a messy bun, and eyes that reminded him of early morning hikes, clear, grounded with something sharp underneath. "I'm Ms. Rivera, Sophia Rivera. I'm Ethan's homeroom teacher." He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." She didn't shake it right away. She glanced at it, then offered a tight smile as if deciding something mid-thought. When their hands met, her grip was firm but quick. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" She didn't answer, just nodded toward a desk. "Let's sit." The chairs were tiny. He folded himself into one, knees up like a giant among dolls, while she took the seat across from him without any awkwardness at all. She seemed to fit into the space without shrinking. She laid out a folder between them and opened it. "Ethan's a bright kid, quiet but observant. He reads at a 7th grade level, which is impressive for a 4th grader." Matthew felt a flicker of pride. He's always been good with books, like stories. Not just stories, he likes characters. He rewrote the ending of Charlotte's Web last week because he said it wasn't fair that Charlotte died. He gave a short laugh. "That sounds like him." Sophia studied him carefully. He's also alone a lot. Matthew straightened. "I've made sure he's well cared for." "I'm not talking about material care." There was a pause, not long but enough for her words to settle. "I work a lot," he said, keeping his tone even. "I'm building something." "I know. He told me you have an office on the top floor of a building you don't like." Matthew blinked. "He said that." She smiled. "He also said you eat dinner standing up most nights." He said nothing. He wasn't sure what game she was playing, but he didn't appreciate the angle. "He's not acting out," she continued. "But kids don't always yell when something's wrong. Sometimes they just stop inviting you in." A rush of defensiveness stirred in him. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Lane. I'm observing, like Ethan does." He folded his arms. "What would you suggest, that I quit my job, take up cross-stitch and join the PTA?" Her expression didn't flinch. "I'd suggest you come to lunch with him sometime this month. Bring something simple, a sandwich, sit with him." "That's hardly." "It's everything," she said, quiet but clear. Matthew looked down at the folder. Ethan's handwriting in one corner caught his eye, small, neat, a little slanted. There was a sentence he'd written under a drawing of their apartment. "I live on the 32nd floor. Sometimes it feels like a cloud." He didn't remember ever seeing that. "Do you have children?" he asked suddenly. Sophia paused. "No, but I have 30 of them every day, and some of them go home to silence." He didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could. When the meeting ended, she stood and extended her hand again. This time, he hesitated before shaking it. "Thank you for coming," she said. It mattered to him. Outside, the cold bit through his coat. He didn't return to the Bentley right away. Instead, he walked a slow circle around the school building, his footsteps crunching over scattered leaves. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. A reminder about a late-night conference call. He silenced it. From the window of Ethan's classroom, a soft light glowed. He imagined his son sitting at a desk, rewriting the end of a story where someone didn't have to die just because they were small and good. And he wondered, for the first time in a long while, what kind of character he was becoming in his own son's story. The next morning, Matthew stood at the window of his corner office, staring down at the city that had once felt like a chessboard, predictable, controllable. Now it just looked noisy, a blur of traffic, people, and too many things moving too fast. His assistant knocked once before entering. Board meeting in 20. He nodded but didn't move. Cancel my call with Berlin tonight. She blinked. Should I reschedule or? Just cancel. There was a beat of silence before she said, understood. He stayed at the window long after she left. Something in him was shifting, slowly, subtly, like the way glass warps over time. The night before had left an impression. That teacher, Sofia Rivera, had unsettled him, not by being confrontational, just by being right. That evening he picked up Ethan from school himself. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. Just jeans and a navy pullover he hadn't worn in years. His son was waiting by the fence, backpack slung over one shoulder, head down as he kicked at a stone. When he looked up and saw Matthew, there was a flicker of surprise. "You're early," Ethan said. "I thought we could walk a bit, if you're up for it." Ethan nodded, quiet as always. But Matthew noticed the way his grip tightened slightly on the strap of his bag, like he wasn't sure if this was real. They walked past a park where kids were climbing things that probably weren't safe. A few dads were on benches, hunched over phones. One was lifting his daughter onto a monkey bar while she screamed with delight. Ethan glanced at them. "We did monkey bars today. Mason got stuck at the top." Matthew chuckled. "What happened?" "Ms. Rivera climbed up and got him down. She's not scared of anything." A pause. "You like her?" Ethan shrugged. "She listens." The words stung more than Matthew expected. They kept walking. At dinner they sat down for once. No emails, no rush. Just spaghetti and silence broken by Ethan telling him about a book he was writing in a spiral notebook. "It's about a boy who turns into a hawk," he said, twirling noodles. "But only when no one's looking." "Why a hawk?" "Because hawks can see everything, from really high up. Like they can tell when something's wrong even if no one says it." Matthew stared at his son a moment too long. Then he reached for more pasta. That night after Ethan went to bed, Matthew stood outside his door, hand resting against the frame. He could hear the faint scratch of pen against paper. No screens, no video games, just Ethan writing. He found himself wondering what kind of father his son was writing into the story. The next morning he packed lunch. It felt absurd at first, slapping turkey between slices of bread, cutting the crusts the way Ethan liked, adding a juice box. Then he added a second sandwich. At noon he arrived at the school with both lunches in a brown paper bag, unsure of where to go. The cafeteria smelled like warm cheese and something sticky. Kids sat in uneven rows, shouting across tables. It was chaotic, real. Ethan spotted him before he spotted Ethan. His son waved, face lit up in a way that stopped Matthew's breath for a second. It wasn't just happiness. It was disbelief turning into pride. Matthew walked over, awkwardly threading between crowded benches. Ethan had cleared a space beside him. Sophia stood by the wall, watching without interfering. She nodded once, not a smile, just acknowledgement. "Turkey and cheese," Matthew said, placing the bag down. "No mustard." Ethan unwrapped it carefully, like it was something rare. They ate in pieces, words, bites, silences. Some of Ethan's classmates stared, but none said much. One girl whispered to another, "That's Ethan's dad," like it was both surprising and slightly cool. Matthew noticed Sophia helping a boy open a juice pouch across the room. She knelt at eye level, said something that made him laugh, and moved on. He wondered how often she had to be the adult when others didn't show up. After lunch, Ethan returned to class. Matthew was about to leave when Sophia appeared beside him, arms crossed lightly over her chest. "You showed up. I said I would." She nodded, then tilted her head slightly. It meant something to him, you should know that. I think I do. For a moment they stood there, not as CEO and teacher, but as two people on the edge of something neither could name yet. You're not what I expected, he admitted. And what did you expect? A lecture or someone who would treat me like a project. I don't fix people, she said. I just ask questions they usually avoid answering. He watched her leave without waiting for a reply. The rest of his day felt strange, empty in places that usually felt crowded. He couldn't focus in meetings, couldn't summon his usual fire during strategy sessions. At home that night, Ethan handed him a page from his notebook. I finished chapter 3. Matthew took it, reading aloud without being asked. The Hawk Boy was learning how to land. He kept crashing at first, but he was getting closer. That night Matthew sat in the living room long after Ethan was asleep, the page still in his hands. Maybe he thought some stories weren't built on victory. Maybe they were built on return. 3 weeks passed. The leaves outside Ethan's school turned a shade darker each day, rust-colored and brittle, clinging to branches like they didn't want to let go. Mornings came colder, and the walk from the Bentley to the school gates grew longer, not in distance, but in the quiet effort it took for Matthew to keep showing up. He had become a familiar sight now. Sometimes he came for drop-off. Sometimes he showed up with a book to read during Ethan's free period. He never announced himself beforehand. He didn't need to. Ethan's face always answered the same way, half shocked, half sure he might vanish again. But Matthew didn't vanish. Sophia noticed. He'd caught her watching from across the hallway once, arms folded, that same thoughtful look in her eyes. She never praised him for showing up, never patted his ego, but something in her softened around him now. Their conversations, short, quiet things stolen between classes, became less formal, more like a slow undoing of assumptions. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan was invited to a classmate's birthday party, his first in months. I told Milo I'd go if you came too, Ethan said, not looking up from the table where he was lining up colored pencils by height. Matthew glanced up from his phone. You want me to come? Ethan nodded. His dad's bringing a bouncy castle. I don't do bouncy castles, Matthew said dryly. Ethan grinned just a little. I know, but I want you there. So Saturday came, and Matthew found himself in a backyard full of cupcakes, folding chairs, and the kind of organized chaos he'd only seen in stock images. The sky was cloudless. Dogs barked from somewhere nearby. Children screamed with the unchecked glee of sugar and freedom. He felt overdressed in a sweater and clean jeans. Ethan had disappeared into a group clustered around a magician. Matthew stood near the drinks table, holding a soda, feeling like he'd snuck into someone else's life. Didn't peg you as a party guy, a voice said beside him. He turned. Sophia was there in a denim jacket and simple black dress, sipping lemonade. Her hair was down this time, slightly wind-blown. She looked different without the classroom around her, less contained. I was promised a bouncy castle, he said. She tilted her head. So was I, disappointed. I don't think I was ever the target audience. She smiled, slow and genuine. Maybe you were once. Matthew took a sip of soda. What about you? Do you make the rounds at all your students' birthdays? Only when I'm invited. She glanced toward the kids. Milo's mom said she needed backup. You're good at that, showing up. Sophia looked at him, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. So are you now. He wasn't sure what to say to that, but he didn't look away. Later, after the magic tricks and the melting cupcakes and a dozen tiny disasters disguised as games, Ethan tugged on his sleeve. Ms. Rivera said I could stay for a bit and help clean. Can I? Matthew hesitated, surprised. You want to help clean up? She said I'm good at sorting things. Matthew looked over to see Sophia stacking chairs with another parent, a quiet rhythm to the way she moved. Ethan was already halfway across the yard before he could answer. He ended up staying too. They took down decorations and picked up paper plates and laughed when one of the balloons popped behind them. Sophia handed him a trash bag without asking, and he took it without question. When it was just the two of them by the fence, watching Ethan and Milo chase a half-deflated soccer ball, Sophia leaned against the wooden rail. "He's changed," she said quietly. "Not all at once, but it's there. He laughs more, looks people in the eye again." Matthew exhaled. I didn't realize how far away I'd gotten from him, from everything. "It's not a crime to get lost," she said. "Just a tragedy if you stay lost." They stood like that for a while, the wind rustling dry leaves around their feet. "Do you ever feel like you were made for one thing, and then suddenly that thing doesn't fit anymore?" he asked, the words tumbling out before he could edit them. She didn't answer right away. "I was supposed to go to law school," she said after a moment. "Got in, full ride, then my sister got sick and I stayed to help raise my nephew. Teaching was supposed to be temporary. That was 6 years ago." Matthew turned to her. "Do you regret it?" "I used to, I don't anymore." "Why?" "Because this," she gestured toward the empty yard, the chairs, the balloon still drifting in a tree, "matters. Not in a flashy way, but in a way that sticks. I think that's what real meaning looks like, quiet and inconvenient." Matthew nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "You don't have to be just one thing forever," she added, softer now. "People change, or they should." He looked up at her. "I want to." Her eyes held his for a long time, then she said, "Good." They parted ways as the sun dipped low. Ethan fell asleep in the car, a smudge of frosting still on his cheek. Matthew didn't wake him right away when they got home. He sat in the driveway, engine off, watching his son breathe, small and curled in the passenger seat like he used to be years ago. A time Matthew couldn't believe he'd let blur past. For the first time, he didn't want to rush into the house, into emails, into plans. For the first time, he let himself stay still. The first snow came quietly, not the kind that demanded attention with flurries and whiteouts, but a soft dusting that settled on rooftops and stretched across lawns like a whisper. Matthew watched it from the kitchen window as Ethan spread peanut butter across toast, still in his pajamas. He looked taller lately, not in inches but in presence, more anchored. His silences no longer felt like distance, they felt like thought. Matthew set down his coffee and turned to him. "Would you want to go away for the weekend?" Ethan looked up, surprised. "Like a trip?" "Yeah, somewhere small. I thought maybe a cabin. There's a place upstate I used to visit when I was younger." Ethan chewed for a moment. "Will there be snow?" "Probably." "Can I bring my notebook?" "Only if I can bring mine." Ethan smirked. "You don't have a notebook." Matthew walked over to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a blank leather-bound journal. "I bought one." Ethan grinned. "Okay, I'm in." They left Friday afternoon, driving through winding roads where the trees stood bare and proud. The cabin was old but well kept, 2 small bedrooms, a stone fireplace, quilts that smelled like cedar and something familiar Matthew couldn't name. They spent the first night playing board games by the fire. Ethan beat him 3 times in a row at checkers, then insisted they try drawing instead. They sketched poorly but laughed freely, and when it was time for bed, Ethan asked, "Do you think Mom would have liked this place?" Matthew blinked. The question arrived without warning, not heavy, just curious. "I think she would have loved it," he said after a moment. "She liked quiet things, places that let you breathe." "She liked snow." "She did." Neither of them said much more after that. But when Ethan leaned against him for a minute longer before going to bed, Matthew didn't move. The next morning they took a walk through the woods behind the cabin. Snow crunched under their boots and the air smelled of pine and cold earth. Ethan pointed out animal tracks. Matthew guessed wrong every time. "You'd be a terrible scout," Ethan said, laughing. "Maybe," Matthew replied, "but I'm good at finding my way back." They stopped near a frozen stream. Ethan crouched, tapping the surface with a stick. "Ms. Rivera says frozen water is still water. It just needs warmth to move again." Matthew nodded. "She sounds like a poet." "She says she just reads a lot." There was a pause. "You like her, don't you?" Ethan asked suddenly, not looking up. Matthew hesitated. "I think I do." Ethan poked at the ice again. "She likes you too. She always talks different when your name comes up." Matthew couldn't help a small smile. You talk about me. Not always in bad ways. They returned to the cabin as the sky turned that early winter gray, the kind that warned of more snow without promising it. Inside, they made cocoa and worked on their notebooks. Ethan wrote a new scene for his Hawk Boy story. Matthew stared at a blank page before finally writing a single line. I didn't know I was drifting until someone called my name. That night while Ethan slept, Matthew stepped out onto the porch. The snow had started again, thin, slow flakes, each one dissolving the moment it touched his skin. He sat in one of the wooden chairs, wrapped in a wool blanket, and opened his phone. A message from Sophia sat unread. How's the cabin? Hope the snow's not stealing your cell signal. He typed back. Cold, quiet, perfect. Wish you were here to correct my tree facts. Apparently I can't tell a birch from a beech. Her response came quickly. Beech has smooth bark, birch peels like paper, but I'll forgive you. Another message followed. You seem different lately, softer maybe. He stared at the words, then replied, trying to remember who I was before I started mistaking success for love. This time, the pause before her answer stretched longer. That's not something most people say out loud. He wrote back, that's because most people don't sit still long enough to notice. They didn't message after that. The silence didn't feel unfinished. It felt like a pause in the middle of something growing. On Sunday, they packed up the car. Before they left, Ethan stood by the fireplace and looked back at the cabin. Can we come back sometime? He asked. Matthew ruffled his hair. Yeah, I think we should. Back in the city, the pace returned, but not in the same way. Matthew started delegating more. He came home earlier. The kitchen light was on more often. Some nights he and Ethan cooked dinner together, clumsily but with laughter. One Friday, Ethan came home with a flyer in his backpack. Winter showcase, he said. Ms. Rivera's organizing it. There's music, poems, stories. She asked if I'd read mine. Matthew scanned the flyer, and I said I'd do it, but only if you come. I wouldn't miss it. He meant it. The night of the showcase, the auditorium buzzed with parents and soft chatter, and the sound of folding chairs being dragged into neat rows. Students milled around, some in costume, some nervously reciting lines. Ethan sat backstage, holding his notebook, legs swinging under the bench. You nervous? Matthew asked, crouching beside him. A little, but I want to do it. Matthew gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. You're going to be great. Ethan gave a small nod. She's over there. Matthew turned. Sophia stood near the curtain, clipboard in hand, giving directions to a student. When she looked up and saw him, something in her posture eased. She didn't wave, just smiled. That was enough. Ethan's name was called. He stepped onto the stage with steady steps, notebook in hand. The microphone was too high. Sophia adjusted it for him with a reassuring wink. Then he began. The story had changed. The Hawk Boy still soared, still watched the world from above. But now he was learning to fly not to escape, but to understand. He talked to people on the ground. He made friends. He built a nest, not to hide in, but to share. And when he landed, people noticed the sky for the first time in a long time. When the last word was spoken, the room was quiet for a breath. Then applause rose, loud and full and warm. Ethan looked toward the seats, found his father, smiled. Matthew stood, clapping. Sophia came to stand beside him, folding her arms lightly. He changed the ending, she said. He changed everything, Matthew replied. She looked up at him, then reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. The holidays came with less fanfare than the year before. No glittering galas, no black-tie benefits. Matthew declined every invitation that wasn't handwritten in crayon or delivered by a boy with toast crumbs on his sweater. The company's end-of-year numbers came in higher than expected. His CFO was thrilled. Investors sent champagne. Matthew read the report once, then closed his laptop and turned on the kettle instead. He was learning to measure value in quieter ways. Ethan had taken to rearranging the living room. So the tree feels like it's part of the room, not a guest. he explained while dragging the coffee table toward the window. Matthew watched him, smiling at the logic. You ever think about becoming an interior designer? I think about becoming a lot of things, Ethan said. I think I like that. They decorated the tree together on a Friday night. Ethan hung the ornaments methodically, old ones from when he was younger, newer ones made of paper and glue. Matthew hung the ones Ethan handed him, no questions asked. When they were done, they turned off all the lights except for the ones on the tree. It looks like breathing, Ethan said. Matthew didn't answer, just watched the soft pulse of color and light reflected in his son's eyes. The next afternoon, he found himself standing outside the school long after the last bell. There was no real reason, no meeting, no event, but the halls weren't empty. Through the window, he saw Sophia inside her classroom, sleeves rolled up, wiping the whiteboard. The room looked half dismantled, chairs stacked, posters removed, as if the year was slowly being put to bed. He knocked gently. She looked up, surprised, then opened the door without a word. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" he asked. She stepped aside to let him in. Only a war between me and a broken staple remover. The classroom felt different without the hum of children, quieter, more vulnerable. "I came to drop something off," he said, holding out a small box wrapped in brown paper. She raised an eyebrow. "You brought me a present." "Don't worry, it's not jewelry or a check." She opened it carefully, unfolding the paper to find a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside the cover he had written, "For the one who asked the right questions." Her thumb brushed the page. "You didn't have to." "I know." Sophia set the notebook down and leaned against the desk. "You've changed." He nodded. "I had help. I only nudged the wheel, you did the turning." "I kept thinking change would look like everything falling apart," he said. "But it's quieter than that, it's showing up. It's peanut butter toast. It's learning how to wait." She smiled. "That's the thing about growth, it doesn't shout." Matthew stepped closer, not urgently, just enough to close the distance. "I want to keep learning, not just how to be a father, but how to be more." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes steady. "More doesn't always mean doing more." "I know." He reached for her hand. This time there was no hesitation on either side. Outside, the first real snow of winter began to fall, soft, heavy flakes that stuck to windows and softened edges. Later that week, they invited her over. Ethan helped Matthew cook, sort of. Mostly he stirred things too long and rearranged the place cards he insisted on making. Sophia arrived in a long coat and thick scarf, cheeks pink from the cold. Ethan greeted her at the door like it was the most natural thing in the world. They ate spaghetti by candlelight. Not fancy candles, just tea lights in mismatched jars Ethan had lined along the table. Sophia told stories from school. Ethan interrupted twice with jokes that barely landed, and Matthew laughed anyway. After dessert, Sophia stayed a little longer. Ethan drifted off on the couch with a book open on his chest. Matthew brought her tea. They sat together in the living room, the glow of the tree warming the corners of the space between them. "You know," she said, looking around, "this feels like a story he'd write." "A hog boy story." "No, a real one, about people learning how to stay." He turned to her. "Do you think we'll get it right?" Sophia took a long sip of tea. "I think we already are, not perfect, but real." Outside, the wind picked up. Snow fell harder, swirling through the streetlights in flurries of white and gold. Inside, the warmth held. Ethan stirred on the couch, half asleep, murmuring something about hawks and nests. Matthew stood, lifted the boy gently into his arms, and carried him to bed. When he returned, Sophia hadn't moved, but something in her had shifted, like maybe this, too, felt like home. They didn't kiss, not yet, but their hands found each other again, and this time they didn't let go. The room was quiet. No announcements, no dramatic endings. Just the soft, steady sound of two people learning how to be seen, and the boy who gave them both a reason to begin.